Evening, councillors, and welcome to our first meeting of the new year, 2022, and welcome you all to our P&R meeting tonight, and Happy New Year to you all. I'll give you, sorry RNC, that could be a bad omen how this is going to go, but anyway, at least I have Councillor Irvine to keep me right here. So I'll give you 30 seconds and then we're getting into it. Thank you. Good evening, councillors, and again, welcome to our meeting tonight. We are obviously hybrid again, but there's very minimal councillors in the chamber. So it's obviously everybody has listened to the email which Alison sent out. Just a bit of housekeeping before I start. I'm going to give everybody a fair go tonight. I'm not going to ask the mics to be unmuted. You can basically come in for points of order and to highlight any problems. But what I'm going to say, the first person who abuses the system and comes in before they're asked to come in, then we're reverting back to where you will have to indicate and wait for your mic to be muted. If you're making any points of order tonight, please specify which number it's under. Also, we are, as per usual, we are going to move any other business to after item 9, because we're going to move the confidential matters up to after item 8, because we need to get that sorted out tonight. We are, as I said, we're going to move item 10, confidential matters, to after item 8 and before correspondence, and then we'll do matters arising after that. So we'll start off in our usual way. First of all, I'll be taking apologies, and I'll go to the group leaders. And first of all, I'll go to Councillor Tommy Maguire.
Guramagat Victor, Nalian Lashkilt own group of Sinn Féin and Oct. There's no apologies from the Sinn Féin group tonight. Victor, thank you. Guramagat.
Thank you for that. I'll go now to Robert Irvine of the Ulster Unionist Party.
Thanks very much, Chair. Victor, no apologies from the UP group this evening. Best knowledge, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Robertson of the DUP.
Thank you, Chair. No apologies from DUP, but Councillor Elliott will probably be a bit late joining.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Mary Gardy of the SDLP.
Thank you, Chair. Victor, no apologies tonight, but John, Councillor Coyle, just a few minutes late. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go to the single member parties and the independents. Anybody know if there's any apologies there?
Chair, Councillor Keenan sends his apologies. He's at work, but he's hoping to get out and be able to join at some stage later on in the meeting, but he'll not be here for the start of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will go on to item number 2, which is to sign the minutes and confidential minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of December 21. That has already been done. And then we will go to item 3, which is declarations of interest. And the first person up is Councillor Earl Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. And declarations of interest that I'm aware of so far are items 5.1 and 5.2 and 6.1. And the 5.1 and 5.2 refer to the grant aid panel, and 6.1 refers to event strategy working group. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Howard Thornton. Sorry, Councillor Mary Gardy.
Thank you, Chair. 5.1, 5.2, member of the grant aid panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Howard Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. 5.1, 5.2, member of the grant aid appeal panel. Thank you.
Councillor John McCloughy.
Thank you, Chair. It's 5.1. I'm on the management committee of one of the recipients, and I'm a member of 2 of the other groups, one receiving money and one not receiving money. I'll remain, but I'll not take any active part. I'd like to hear how it progresses.
Okay, Councillor Paul Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. 5.6, 2.14 Mon Enterprise, and 7.1 Lag.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alan Rainey.
5.1, Chair. TEL, Trollick Enterprise.
Okay. Councillor Emmett Mcinleader.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 5.1 and 5.2 as a member of the Grant Aid Appeals Committee. Thank you.
Councillor Alex Baird.
Thank you, Chair. 5.2 as Chair of Board of Governors of a school receiving a grant, and 6.1 Event Strategy Working Group. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon McPhillips.
Thanks, Chair. 6.1 also Event Strategy Working Group.
Councillor Bert Wilson. You are unmuted, Bert. I think you're having broadband problems. Let's see, we triangle up here. So we'll come back to you, Councillor Sean Clark.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Member of the grant aid panel and also a member of LAG. I think that's 5.152.
Okay.
I can't remember where LAG is, but I'm sure it can be tracked down.
Councillor Anne-Marie Fitzgerald.
Yes, Chair. I want to declare an interest in being in the grant aid panel because 5.1, 5.2. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen McCann.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, 5.1 as a director of one of the companies receiving money there, and 6.1 as a member of the Event Strategy Working Group.
Councillor Josephine Deehan.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. 5.2 and 5.6, Chair as a member of one of the associated groups. Thank you.
Councillor Barry McElduff.
Yes, Chair. 5.1, committee member of Era Og Hurling Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Deanna Armstrong.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair. 7.1 as a member of LAG and also the Peace Partnership.
Okay, Councillor Thomas O'Reilly.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you, Victor. 5.2, grant aid panel, Chairman of St. Kevin's College receiving grant aid, and 6.1 Event Strategy Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Siobhan Curry.
Good Carly, and good evening. 6.1 Event Strategy Working Group and 7.1 as a member of the LAG. I'll be staying in for both of them, though.
Okay, Councillor Stephen Donnelly.
Thanks, Chair. 6-1 Event Strategy Working Group. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald, can you take your hand down, please? Councillor, we'll try Councillor Bert Wilson again.
Yes, Chair. Sorry about that. I don't know what the problem was, but 5.1, currently chairman of the Grant Aid panel.
Okay,
I
thank
think that's
you.
5.1. Thank you.
Councillor Tommy Maguire.
Guramagarda Carley, thanks, Chair. Also a member of the Grant Aid panel and also a director on Fermanagh Enterprise. Guramagarda, Chair.
Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. 7.2 is a member of the LAG, please. Thank you.
Councillor Barry McElduff.
Yeah, again, Chair, just omitted to refer to being a director of OMA Enterprise Company Limited, which is in Table 3 and 5.1. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor in the chamber, Councillor Robert Irvine.
Thank you. Under 7.2, report of the director, under item 2.7, being a board member of PHA.
Okay, Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 6.2, I'm on the board of one of the two generalist advice providers. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Adam Gannon.
Thank you, Chair. 5.2, employee of St. Kevin's who are receiving funding.
Okay, Councillor Matthew Bell.
5.1 as a board member of OMA Enterprise.
Councillor Josephine Deehan.
Apologies, Chair, for coming in again. 7.1 as a member of the Peace Partnership.
Okay, Councillor Mark Buchanan.
5.1, Chair of the Grant Aid Appeals panel, please. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Earl Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for coming on again. I think I better declare an interest again on 5.1 as a member or a director of OMA Enterprise Company Limited. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stephen Donnelly.
Likewise, Chair. Apologies, just on the same issue.
Okay. Okay, if you think of any more during the meeting, just let us know. As I said, matters horizon has been moved now, so we will go on to item number 5, and that's the Regeneration and Planning Director reports. And the first one up is 5.1, is to consider a report on the grant aid recommendations for capital grant paper A. And it's over to Kim.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval of the recommendations of the Grant Aid Panel in respect of applications for capital grant aid for the 21 to 23 period. There are some errors in respect of the date references in this report, so just to clarify that all references to the years in respect of the funding should be 2021 to 2023. In terms of the applications, 39 were received and assessed in respect of our funding policy. There are 2 appendices which set out the Grant Aid E-Panel report and the minutes of the meeting. The assessment process took place and recommendations are now being presented. The allocated budget is 300,000 for the 2-year period. As a result of an allocation carried over from the previous call, the budget is increased to just over 304,000. The total value of applications which scored over the award threshold is just over 330,000, which exceeds the available budget by £25,788.99. So the following options were presented to the Grant Aid Panel members for consideration. Option 1 being to enable funding to be awarded to all groups which have scored over the award threshold, that a request is made for an additional allocation of a maximum of £30,000 through the capital funding reports for the two-year period, or option 2, that funding would be allocated in ranked order of score up to the current available budget, with projects thereafter placed on a reserve and awarded funding based on a rank order. And based on the table that's attached, there would be 2 applications which would be on a reserve list. Members of the Grant Aid Panel considered the options, and option 1 was selected as a preferred option. So it is now recommended that the committee approves the recommendations of the Grant Aid E-Panel meeting on the 17th of December, and approves an additional allocation of funding to the Grant Aid programme of just over 25,000, which would be supported through additional capital funding over the 2-year period.
Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I'm happy to propose as has been suggested, it would be foolish, I think, to go through this process and to deny. There are some excellent projects there that I think could go forward very easily. I have one question really around this. I note at the bottom of page 1 that additional marks are awarded to projects based in the more deprived MDMs. More deprived wards under the MDM, multiple deprivation measure. That is, sorry. When I looked through the list, however, now there were 1 or 2. I see one from Newtown Butler Playgroup. There were really not that many from highly deprived areas, really. And I'm just wondering whether this approach is sufficient, really, to encourage applications that will benefit deprived communities in particular. And I would like to request if there's maybe some consideration of the capacity of communities in these areas to make applications to the point that they actually that we translate an approach which certainly increases the scoring for applications coming forward from areas where there is deprivation, higher deprivation, to the point that there's actually more money going to projects in areas with higher deprivation. And to that end, I do notice one application there from Ishka in Enniskillen. I have no issue at all with that, but I'm wondering, is there any information, for example, on how or whether that will at all benefit communities in, say, for example, the neighbourhood renewal area in Enniskillen? So I just think that this needs to move from being a mechanism of scoring to an actual outcome in terms of projects developed that will benefit deprived communities. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, next up we have Councillor Robert Irvine.
Thanks very much. Take on board the comments made by Councillor O'Coffey. The unfortunate thing may be is we're looking for community groups and organisations right across council district to come forward. So it may not be possible to actually get into multiple deprivation areas as it mightn't be the depth and breadth of the organisation to take up that capacity. But I understand the thrust of where he's coming from, and I would no problem supporting it. Question before I would second the 2 recommendations. The approved additional capital required of approximately 26k. Do we know the profiling of that? We know the funding is stretched over 2 years. Is the additionality required going to be required year 1 or year 2?
Would profile it equally over the 2 years in terms of our estimates and budgetary allocations. However, it's likely to, the spend's likely to be drawn down mostly in 2. But there may also be, and historically there have always been withdrawals and some underspends in this programme, so the whole additionality in terms of the full 26k may not actually be required as we work through the programme.
That was the second part of the question I was going to have. If there is underspend, then we won't be allocating any additional money. This is only a requirement if it is needed in the extreme. If that's the case, I think you've answered the question, so I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Councillor Diana Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Kim one question, and I welcome this funding, which is, which supports community work and work where all have access to community facilities. It's really when the director mentioned the reserve fund, and they are ranked in order, and the table we have there at table 2, is that the order in which they are considered? And really, I'm interested particularly in the North Fermanagh Cricket and Football Association Club, because I do believe they've done a lot of work with a partnership with Praxis. They do require, there are similar projects that have been approved. Kesh does require a disabled toilet for the Praxis members who come to user facilities, also the accessible pathway around the site. So I just am requesting, is there what is the appeals process here? Can this be reviewed, and what is the process that they need to undertake, as they seem to be very, very close to margin of approval? Thank you.
There is an appeals process associated with this, and we can certainly contact North Fermanagh Cricket if they want to submit an appeal and inform us of that. Then we will take them through and work with them through that process.
And can I ask, is it #1 ranking in the reserve list as it stands?
Yes, my understanding is that they are ranked in, yes, they are listed in ranked order.
Okay, thank you very much, Kim.
Okay, and finally, we have Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. No, it was just in relation to what Councillor O'Coffey said about the deprivation areas. I am a kind of an opinion that we to get badly funded from Stormont by using that exact criteria. Being a rural council, funding doesn't end up coming to rural areas. And if the council is using that, again, I would suspect that rural areas are being underscored due to that, because of the distance people live apart. For instance, in my own electoral area, Cunyon isn't deemed as a deprived area because it's connected to the Brupra ward. But I would suggest that the way that deprivation is calculated really does need to be looked at. And I'll be a wee bit concerned that if the council has gone down the same route as the government departments, which we all, I think, agree really discriminates against rural Fermanagh and rural Omagh because of that exact criteria. Just a comment on that.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, you've heard the recommendations proposed and seconded. Is everybody happy? Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item 5.2, and that is to consider the report on grant aid recommendations for community services, project development grant 21-22, and Covet premises adoption grant, and the call to open grant for 22-23.
Thank you, Chair. As you've noted, the purpose of the report is to request approval for the recommendations of the Grant Aid panel held on the 11th of January in respect of Project Development Grant Aid, Covet Premises Adaptation Fund for 21-22, and to note grants allocated up to the value of £500 in respect of the Covet Premises Adaptation Fund, and also to seek approval to open a Grant Aid programme, first call for 2022-23, and that would open on Tuesday the 25th of January and close on Tuesday the 15th of February. And the recommendation is that the Council approves the recommendations of the Grant Aid e-panel meeting held on the 11th of January, notes the awards approved by the relevant head of service, and approves the opening of the Grant Aid programme first call.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've heard the recommendations. Can I have a proposer, please? Proposed by Councillor Siobhan Curry. Could I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly. Okay, you've heard it proposed and seconded. Is everybody happy? Move on to item 5.3, and that's to consider the report on Derry City and Strabane District Council Local Development Plan 2032, Draft Plan Strategy, Schedule of Proposed Changes, Paper C.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides members with a review of the report on Derry City and Strabane District Council's Local Development Plan Schedule of Proposed Changes. It's accompanied by various addendums attached to the report and via the link on page 1. Council did previously comment on the Derry City and Strabane's Local Development Plan Draft Plan Strategy in January. that council is now proposing a number of changes to its LDP draft plan strategy, and those are set out in the schedule. The consultation period now will run for 8 weeks up to the 3rd of February. And it's important to note that any comments made at this stage can only address and relate to the soundness of those proposed changes. And officers suggest that the following comments form the basis of the council's response. So there's reference to a number of specific policies within the proposed changes there. The conclusion is that the council officers consider that the contents of the schedule of proposed changes are not in conflict with Fermanagh and Omagh District Council's draft plan strategy, although we do recognise that in addressing specific issues, the respective councils' approaches have developed slightly differently, but no significant areas or areas of conflict. So it's recommended that the council agrees to submit comments to Derry City and Strabane District Council reflecting the views outlined within section 2 of this report.
Okay, first to speak is Councillor Bernice Swift.
Gurmagat Cahirlock, I'm content to propose the recommendation with the key issues going forward. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Gardaí.
I'll second, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. You've heard it proposed and seconded that the recommendations are accepted. Is everybody happy? Thank you. We'll move on to item 5.4, and that's to consider a report on the proposed variation to the County Donegal Development Plan 18 to 24 in respect of Wind Energy Policy Framework Paper D.
Chair, so as you've mentioned, this report provides members with a review of the proposed variation to the County Donegal Development Plan, and there are a number of reports accompanying this cover report. The development plan was adopted in May 2018, came into effect in June 2018, but subsequent to that adoption and by a High Court order, certain provisions of the plan relating to wind energy were ordered to be deleted and or removed from the plan. Donegal County Council proposes to address those gaps by way of a statutory variation to the plan, and the proposed variation includes a new wind energy map. It identifies areas designated as either acceptable in principle, open to consideration, or not normally permissible for wind energy development. In terms of our proposed comments, officers feel it's important to request that Donegal County Council has regard to the objectives and policies within our own draft plan strategy as part of their consideration of the variation and the implementation of the policies. And there are specific policy areas in terms of wind energy which we would point them to and are outlined in section 2 of the report. That relates specifically to environmental landscapes and visual and amenity impacts. And apart from that, there's no significant conflict in the approaches. The Council has previously raised concerns about the potential visual impact of new wind farm developments on border areas, particularly around areas of high scenic value at Lower Lough Erne and around the setting of the village of Balik. Officers would encourage Donegal County Council to have regard to the studies which supports the Fermanagh and Omagh local development plan, including the wind energy capacity study, landscape character review and landscape designation review. Officers also note the additional layer in the papers in respect of the Lifford-Stranorlar Municipal District area at risk of landslides and associated environmental and ecological concerns due to the landslide event at the Mean Bog wind farm site recently, and has asked that the Donegal Council also consult DAERA on the SEA and AA. And the recommendation then is that the Council agrees to submit comments to Donegal County Council reflecting the views outlined in this report.
Okay, thank you for that. First up, Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was very interested in reading this development plan, and on one of the pages it says a setback distance of 10 times the hip height of proposed turbines from residential properties and other centres of human habitation. Now, I remember quite well when we were doing our own local development plan. I think we have a distance of 750 metres possibly away from residential, and we were told even though some of us fought and fought and fought to get it put at least 1,000 metres. But going by that there, the big turbines, which probably is 150 metres high, would mean that there couldn't be any closer than 1,500 metres to residential property. So I'm quite interested to see that Donegal was fit to do that and has it in their plan. But we were categorically told that we couldn't do it when we were trying to put that area into ours. So it's quite fascinating, and I'm wondering, is there anyone there that can comment on that? Because it's rather disappointing. It's good for Donegal, but it's disappointing for ourselves.
I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to comment specifically on that point this evening, but I will liaise with the planners and provide a further update to members. I can share that tomorrow with respect to that query.
Okay. Councillor Howard Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. Apart from that query from Seamus, I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation here with the views that have been expressed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Siobhan Curry.
Yeah, well, I think our response is generally good and does highlight the key areas of concern. And I do think it's important that potential wind turbine development in our district should also be considered alongside our impacts on neighbouring districts, and likewise, as outlined in our response, that our neighbouring council areas should take into account the impacts on our district. There's an issue here around the categorisation, and Kim has acknowledged it there, that the different landscape characterisation of areas, strategically it might have a similar outcome, even though they're not the same. I think it's disappointing that categorisations aren't better aligned, and I believe they should be. What's happening here, and if you look at the mapping, it's resulting in different designations within the same landscape. So I think we should be just calling on Donegal County Council to maybe, this may be something for a more strategic level, and we might actually be discussing it later on in the agenda, but I think that they should be working with us more to ensure that landscape characterizations aren't defined by an arbitrary line on the map, but rather the whole landscape more holistically. So if I'm just to make myself clear, Chair, the landscape characterisation should be aligned to the landscape and not the border. And I think that our response states that Donegal needs to be cognizant of FODC and vice versa, but I think we should be looking to align landscape characterisation in both, indeed in all council areas. And I just think that that desire to do that should be submitted in the response for Margaret.
Do you want to second the, with those added in, do you want to second the recommendations?
Yes, I'm happy to second it if that can just be included, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, we have Councillor Emmett Mcinleader.
Thank you, Chair. It's a detailed and an interesting report, but I think whilst it is definitely, it's important to note things like the council will not permit any form of development that would in itself or in combination with existing or approved development have any adverse impact on the intrinsic character or quality of a tourism asset or any part thereof, or diminish its tourism value or part thereof. And has been said there that there's a welcome to the approach in terms of consideration of the environmental sensitivities, scenic and cultural quality, natural heritage areas, geological sites, freshwater pearl mussel catchments, peat bogs, and including and excluding Natura sites, Natura 2000 site buffers, and high scenic amenity areas. I think we need to be looking, I suppose, a bit more at just the visual impact or the impact on amenities. And I think Councillor Green made the reference to 750 metres. I think it was actually 500 metres was the separation distance we were limited to in the same meeting. And I know there were Seamus and a number of others were battling that corner, but unfortunately we were told it was impossible on the night. I think we have to be looking at not just the visual impact or the impact on these protected areas and designated areas. We have to be looking on the impact on human health and the impact on animal health, and things like shadow flickers noted, but things like low frequency noise and infrasound, which there's research to prove that this does impact on those who are living in the downwind of these things. And as Seamus has said, the scale of some of them is quite hard to believe unless you're up beside them. They are the things that need to be considered. So it's not just the visual impact, but it's the direct health impact. I think that looking at the map and the first appendix there on page 6, it's quite scary the amount of area that's open for consideration, and as you can see, the section of area that's not far off our own district area border. So given what has happened in Mean Bog and what's happened in other areas, the length and breadth of the country, I would kind of be very wary about progressing this whole scale and wholeheartedly without considering the impact, not just on the visual impact or on the particular areas and areas of designation, which is very, very important, but also the impact on health. And I think that needs to be possibly recorded a wee bit stronger. And I think specific reference to low frequency noise and to infrasound should be included in that, Chair.
Okay. Councillor O'Coffey.
Thanks, Chair. I just echo, for a start, the comments there made by Councillor Mcinleader. I think public health is always a consideration in these sort of plans. I also think it's, I think all councillors here would be agreed on the need for, a sensitive and sensible approach to consideration of landscapes across this region. And obviously that would include in neighbouring areas in Donegal and so on. I really just want to agree with what Councillor Green referenced earlier on, though. We were told that we couldn't have any higher separation from these giant wind turbines and houses because the policy set by Stormont was, demanded a certain distance. And the problem is really that it has undermined in this and many other regards the ability of this council to set forward a local development plan which really reflects the interests and the democratic will of this council itself. So the question was really posed that if we varied away from the regional strategy, we would have to be able to provide evidence to justify it. Now, there was evidence supplied. I think Councillor Mcinleader certainly and others perhaps sent in evidence to justify a higher separation distance. But in the end up, it was judged that that was not sufficient and that we had to adopt meekly the position that had been set forward by Stormont. But as with many other issues, unfortunately, I think what Stormont is doing does not meet the interest of our people in our council area. So I echo the words of Councillor Green on that. Thank you, Chair.
Again, it's a matter for members whether they wish those comments to be included in or added to the response. At the end of this is our consultation response. It's comments that we can make and suggest to Donegal County Council, but we can't compel Donegal County Council to take account of any of the comments, but certainly we can include them if that's members' view.
Okay, the three people looking back in again has already been in, so I'm not letting you in. We've heard it proposed and seconded the recommendations. Can we please, has everybody agreed with them?
Chair, I don't know if
Please. The recommendations has been seconded. I've asked the question if the committee wants Councillor Mcinleader's comments to be included in it. Is there any dissent from the proposed and seconded of the recommendations as already is?
Chair, can I come in?
Well,
Chair, can I get clarification as well, just whether that is included as well, please? Thank you.
Is there dissent on the original recommendations for the?
Chair, my point is in addition to the, just to clarify, mine is in addition, so not dissenting from the original.
And have you a seconder for your additionals? Councillor O'Coffey, can't see you in there, don't you? Small guy, remember that. Councillor Thornton.
Yes, Chair. I was willing to encompass all in the original proposal with the additions from Councillor Curry and Councillor Mcinleader to keep things simple.
And is everybody happy with that? Okay, passed. We will move on to item 5.5, and that is to consider the report and the review of the strategic planning policy on renewable and low carbon.
Thank you, Chair. So the Department for Infrastructure is currently undertaking a review of strategic planning policy on renewable and low carbon energy, which was announced back in April 21. Correspondence at appendices 2 and 3 was presented to the Planning Committee in December 2021 and was agreed a report would be brought to committee this evening for approval. The deadline for the response is on Friday the 11th of February, and officer comments on the issues paper and the specific questions as set out are attached at Appendix 1. It should be noted that at this stage the views submitted will be used by the Department to inform its draft policy position, and this will then be followed by a full public consultation later in 2022. So there are a number of key issues which are set out at Section 2 of the report. It's recommended that the Council agrees to submit comments to DFI in respect of the issues paper as outlined within Appendix 1.
Councillor O'Coffey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think this is a very important paper for this council area. It's obviously we have to have a very strong voice in the strategy going forwards. Been taken around renewable energy capacity as an area which actually stands to benefit to a colossal extent if this is got right because of our natural environmental wealth in terms of our winds and our environment, which is very much conducive to generation of renewable energy. I think there's a lot of important points made in the draft submission. I'm happy to propose it, but I would like to include a number of additional considerations. The first of those really is around, I think it is important that we state that fossil fuels are not the future, and that as such, this council has certainly taken a position against fracking. And indeed, I think we should put down a position that all exploration for petroleum needs to end, insofar as we know, everyone now knows that the remaining carbon sources of fuel that's in the ground need to remain in the ground if we have any hope of averting runaway climate change. There is a point that we've just discussed actually on page 5. Councillor Green was talking about the rotor diameter distance separation for occupied or approved properties and wind turbines. And I note the same language is used in response to this, and I would just state that given that we wanted a stronger position, I think that the stronger position should at least be reflected in our submission to the department on this issue. There are issues around fugitive emissions on methane, biogas, CHP, and so on, which I think should be developed. We need to be very aware that, you know, anything involving the burning of methane, and which is 1,000 times worse for the greenhouse warming than carbon dioxide, it involves large-scale emissions, and that these set out, you're usually left out in the calculations, but they make methane burning actually worse than coal. And I think that should be something that we highlight here. Fugitive emissions are a major concern, and also underpin maybe even concerns on issues such as hydrogen, so blue hydrogen in particular. There's also a final point I wanted to raise, which is really around the reality. This speaks of a language of, you know, transition to renewables at the very moment when people in our community are really suffering, trying to find the money to pay for heating. And we're talking about like geothermal, which is one of the most expensive systems to adopt when people are struggling to put even coal on the fire. So I think that there needs to be a reality check for Stormont on this document, that we need to say, you know, if you're serious about people making a transition to renewable energy, then you need to finance that and you need to fund that. It's not going to happen. People can't afford it. They can't afford the energy that they're living with, let alone this sort of new technologies that are very expensive. So I think that these issues need to come across, because I think that they reflect the reality that we have as a council and our constituents. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Mcinleader.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I would be fairly supportive of that and happy to second that. I think what is vitally important and what is referenced in this response is the importance again of the siting of these things. And again, like page 2 there talks about it can only be achieved through appropriately sited renewable energy development proposals, which should be not at the expense of our natural or historic environment, landscapes, tourism, assets, or the tourism industry and public health. But I think what we should be doing, and again, we have the opportunity to do through the response, is to be laying down the line here that when we have designated areas or special areas of protection and designation, they should be off limits for this kind of development. They should be off limits for any kind of major disruptive industrial development. And that goes for a number of industries, but for this. And I think we've seen that in our own area. We've seen that being opposed by communities in our own area. I think we need to include some sort of, and I'm sure there'll be opposition to a total ban on designating areas like the areas of outstanding natural beauties, ASSIs, SACs, but I think that's the road that we really need to be going down to protect what we have. The idea that we need to protect our bog and our peatland, and that's not just to do with the dangers associated with building on bogland that we've seen in neighbouring areas, but also to do with the fact that bog and peatland is one of, if not the best, carbon sinks, naturally occurring carbon sinks that we have. And if we're talking about combating climate change, climate chaos, and climate breakdown, these are the areas that we really need to be protecting, not digging up, not concreting over, and not putting massive structures on top of. Again, I think there's talk about protecting amenities, protecting the landscape, but very little talk about the impact on human and effects on health to all living things. So again, reference to low frequency noise, to infrasound, to the likes of shadow flicker, these things should be included, I think, as part of this document too. And hopefully Councillor Coffey will be happy to include them in his original proposal. I was going to make the point on the separation distances, but again,
Can you bring your comments to a close, please?
Surely
Mcinleader?
So the final point then, and I think it's the overarching thing that we need, is community consultation and community buy-in. If these things, if the scale we're all aware of, if they're going into an area, there has to be community buy-in. It has to be acceptable by the people that are living closest to it. And I think that's hugely important that that's part of this process. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
Yeah, and just to note, I think that this is to try and inform what the draft would look like before it goes out to community consultation, I think, if I understand it correctly. I think All Ireland connectivity is missing here. The strategic plan and policy should be outlining an All-Ireland position. We have an All-Ireland energy market, and this is talking about the infrastructure that's required. So the infrastructure requirements should take that into account. I spoke there on the previous item about the need for landscape designations to be aligned. And under question 2 there, I think that the strategic plan and policy should be providing that clarity on an All-Ireland basis. We can see, as we talked about earlier, the difficulties that could arise then through neighbouring designations being different when the landscape should be being categorised the same, and I think that point needs to be made there. On question 7, the co-location, I think that co-location makes sense in a lot of cases, particularly around wind energy or solar storage and the likes of, if you're looking at actual green hydrogen generation, you would need that to be taking place. There has been issues, I think, with lack of storage capacity for renewable energy and connections to the grid. So I think that local storage could transform it and allow us to maximise renewable energy generated. Obviously, there would be areas where it wouldn't be suitable, but where it is suitable, it should be used. Just under question 9A, I think just the comments at the start of it are a little bit confused, but I actually think that might be coming from the department rather than ourselves. I think there's a good point on the heat networks, particularly in relation to trialling those in rural locations. I think that's a very important point. But again, I think we need to look at this on an All-Ireland basis. It may make more sense. I think certainly makes more sense to join up our infrastructure. We've recently had, we know the issues with not joining up infrastructure. We're having it with the water capacity at the moment. So I think that this point just needs to be made there at question 9A, and just to support the research and development that's been outlined there. And thanks to Kim and the team for the report, just into shallow geothermal and biogas, and Ireland has been sort of identified as a key kind of, this could transform energy supply, and it would also create sustainable rural jobs and sustainably tackle a lot of the issues arising from waste and waste residues. So overall, Chair, just I support what has been said. I support the document and the response in general, but just with those points added, Chair. Gurmaga.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. I generally agree with most of what all the other councillors have said. This report, though, does miss one point, and that is the complete lack of infrastructure. We have always been at the end of the wire, and the wire that we have isn't strong enough to take half of the power that we can produce back to where it needs to go, where the main populous areas are. And that's not addressed in this paper at all. Without infrastructure, there's no point. We can have as many wind turbine in every hill, but it's not going to be doing us any good if we can't get rid of, sell that electricity on. And we've all the different ways of storing it. The hydrogen production is a massive one. I would be very keen for that green hydrogen. and then generating electric on the slow times. But we do not have the infrastructure. We've always been at the wrong end of the wire, and that still hasn't been addressed. And there's farmers sitting with planning permission for turbines for years that can't connect to the grid, and it would be a small subsidy to their farming businesses. All this has been going on for years, and it still hasn't been addressed by the powers that we need to be connected up. Doesn't matter where we sell it to, as long as we get connected to somebody, but we're at the wrong end of the wire as usual.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Coffey, I'll let you in, but be brief.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just want to indicate that I'm happy that my proposal would include all the comments that's been made thereafter. And I think just in regard to one point, which is the All Ireland dimension, obviously we do have an All Ireland energy market, but I think if we got our act together, north and south, we would want to be looking far beyond, because we could become an exporter for energy. And I think that that's the challenge for all of us, that we need to maximise that opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, you've heard the seconder happy enough with the all them add-ons?
That's fine, Chair. Yeah, happy enough.
Okay, well, you've heard it proposed and seconded with the numerous add-ons. Is everybody happy that that goes through? Thank you. We will now move on to item number 5.7, and that is to consider reporting the meeting of the Agriculture Liaison Group held on the 6th of January. Sorry? I missed. Apologies. We'll reverse to item 5.6, and that is to consider the report on the business case paper F.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on 4 business cases, and in accordance with our policy, approval is sought for 2 of those business cases, and the other 2 business cases were approved by the senior management team and have been included for noting. The first for approval is the project at Key Lane North Car Park, which improves linkages to the town centre, changes the layout of the car park, will address issues of antisocial behaviour and pedestrian safety. There's a redesign of the car park to provide 2 separate zones with separate entrances and exits, inclusion of footpaths, and then the restoration of the Enniskathleen Park outdoor space, including some renewal of street furniture and biodiversity. The sum is £453,840, and there is an opportunity to draw down funding. So if the application is successful, match funding of £138,840 will be required from the Council. The business case is recommended for approval. The second business case relates to Belcoo to Enniskillen Greenway design project. Approval is sought for the costs of the design stage of this up to REBA stage 4, and an application to part fund has been submitted to the Department for Infrastructure with a letter of comfort provided for 50% of the cost, a total of £187,000. Decision is expected shortly on that, and this forms part of the larger Greenway project from Sligo to Enniskillen. The indicative amount is £374,000, and it's recommended for approval. 2 business cases for noting relate to cycle parking and signage project. So installation of 250 cycle stands across the district on council sites, with the remainder being installed at community venues. There's a list of the council sites provided as an appendix, and that sum is in the amount of 106,350. And then finally, the butter market management is around the lease of the butter market, and an expression of interest for a medium-term management or lease of the facility. One response was received from Fermanagh Enterprise Limited, and an appraisal has been completed. The recommendation is to enter a new management arrangement for 5 years to continue the management of the centre on behalf of the Council through Fermanagh Enterprise Limited. No direct financial cost, and the project has been approved by the senior management team. It's recommended that the Council approves the business cases as outlined, notes a match funding of up to 187,000, and approves that for the Belcoo to Enniskillen Greenway project if funding is not available from other sources. And we note the business cases for the cycle parking and signage project and the butter market Enniskillen.
Okay, first up we have Councillor Bernice Swift.
Guramagat Cahirlock, yes, I am satisfied to propose the recommendations in their entirety and commend the senior management team and all their endeavours with the indicative budgets. It's all to be certainly saluted and commended. Guramagat.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Feely.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no problem second the recommendation as well. And that's 2.1.12 the Greenway from Belcood and Skill. It's a great initiative then. It's great to see so much progress being made on it. Well done to Kim and John and all involved. And that'll be a great, I know it's only early stages yet, but hopefully we can keep it on and it'll be done sooner rather than later. It'd be great boost for not just the local community, but for tourists alike to come to that Greenway the way everybody's out walking now. So I'm just so glad to see it up there this evening and happy to second the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. All these 4 projects I think are very welcome. I'm sure all the Enniskillen councillors will be happy to see this proceeding with Key Lane. It's a lot of money and it's unfortunate that it's come to that, but it's absolutely necessary to address what has been a very long-term problem, and glad to see that coming to fruition. I think it's important as well, the infrastructure around to encourage cycling and also the extension of the Buttermarket lease. There's just 2 questions I wanted to raise really around the Buttermarket. The extension, I understand that a number of these units really at the Buttermarket are meant to be more short-term in terms of occupation, but unfortunately we have a situation where units tend to be occupied for longer. Now, there's no problem with that really, but it does pose problems around capacity, for new entrants and so on. And I'm wondering, is that going to be something that might be addressed in some way in the future? The second question is really around the proposal from the Greenway from Belcood to Enniskillen. I understand that this may involve the restoration of the former railway track. And I'd just like to ask if it's possible to consider at an early stage future-proofing it insofar as these facilities, which may be developed for cyclists and pedestrians, may be in the future used for alternative, maybe tourism-related development around like a small gauge railway or the like. And I think that we should just include these ideas, which I know the Chief Executive is aware of, that these should be at least included as a possibility, and that if there's infrastructure going in, at least the weight that it's capable of bearing would, align to that. And the other point really is that there are the track runs next to quite an ancient graveyard site, an ancient church site, which has unfortunately become quite inaccessible. And I would like to see this Greenway provide and encourage access to that graveyard just outside, so that church just outside Belcood, because I think that it is, along with other churches, ruined churches in the area, very important from a heritage perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Gannon.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as has been said by other councillors, 4 very good projects here. Just to kind of go through them in the order they're in there, obviously Key Lane North, very key approach being taken to reduce antisocial behaviour, and obviously well done to everyone who's been involved in that for a long time. The next one, the Belcood Enniskillen Greenway. It's great to see this progressing in some shape and form. It could be a massive tourism draw and massive economic benefit to the area and the district. And this design phase is very key because it allows it to get to that shovel-ready stage that we've seen that so many other projects need to be at to get funding, and it's a huge project as part of the greater Sligo to Enniskillen Greenway. And the last thing I want to mention is obviously the cycle parking and signage project. As a cyclist, as many of you know, it's good to see there isn't much infrastructure for it in terms of parking and signage, and infrastructure quite often needs to be in place to encourage people to take it up and get onto that active travel, which we're all trying to promote at the minute. But I have to say, and of course the butter market is an excellent project as well. But I commend all the projects and support them, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Elliott.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Like the other councillors, it's good to see this report here tonight, and I would welcome the Keelan car park. And I'd like to thank everybody that's been involved in getting it to this stage. I know it's good to see it in black and white, and you know, considering when all this started a year ago, that it was said that nothing could be done. So it's great to see it at this stage, and just hope that we get the completion on it that we need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank officers for the report, but I'd like to commend our staff for seeking the additional funding rather than council have to fund totally these projects. I think it's excellent to try and source funding from alternative sources. The other thing I just wanted just a question in relation to the cycle parking and signage project. I note the appendix lists 31 sites, you know, on the community venues already earmarked for these stands. Is there any indication as to when the expression of interest process would be rolled out? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Chair, if I can come in there just in that query from Councillor Donnelly. Yeah, the expression of interest for the community schemes will be rolled out almost immediately. The funding for the cycle stands is actually funding to the 31st of March, with maybe some ability to carry over, but most of it will hopefully be going out, and most of the work, or at least the purchase of these items, will be completed before the 31st of March. So it will be pretty quick timescale.
Okay, thank you, John.
And finally, on this, we have Councillor Baird.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll stick there in West on 212, the Belcoot Enniskillen Greenway. I know it comes from Enniskillen as well. It's just as a point of information that there is a cross-border working group on this, and there seems to have been some sort of a hiccup in the system about notifying us and Fermanagh about this. There was a meeting held before Christmas. I was looking at my diary there, and I haven't got the date in my diary because it was on the night of the meeting. I was contacted by someone to say that meeting was on. So I was proactive and made my way into the meeting. So I would just ask Council to ensure that Leitrim Council, who are, I believe, the lead in this, to make sure that proper invitations go out to Fermanagh councillors who are on that committee. Other councillors obviously didn't hear about it, so I sold the case for Fermanagh at the meeting. But as I say, I think we need to make, there had been a hiccup previously as to when there was going to be a meeting. But the original meeting didn't suit us because I think in December it was this meeting that was on. So as I say, we need to make sure that Leitrim correspond properly with us to make sure that those councils that were nominated for that subgroup are made aware and can do our bit for the area. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, you've heard the recommendations proposed and seconded with the additionals. Alan, is everybody happy with those? Okay, thank you. That is passed. We will now move on to item 5.7, which is to consider a report on the meeting of the Agricultural Liaisons Group held on the 6th of January 22.
Thank you, Chair. And this report gives an update on the discussion and the identified recommendations from that meeting. So there were a number of issues discussed and priorities discussed, including information regarding capping of funding available to the agricultural community in the Republic of Ireland, update on a future ALG meeting on the preparation of an update to be provided to a future ALG meeting on agri-food opportunity study being progressed by the Mid-South West. Further update to be brought on our study report in terms of shop local opportunities. There's a meeting on the 26th of January of the group with the chair of the Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Committee to discuss issues including private members' bill regarding and the reinstatement of ANC payments. There's a future meeting on the 3rd of March with the Chief Executive of Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and also we are arranging a meeting which is likely to take place at the same meeting, following on from the meeting with the chair of the DAERA committee in relation to allowing the ALG members to contribute to the consultation on future agricultural policy proposals, which closes on the 15th of February, and a number of items of correspondence identified as well. In respect of the consultation on DAERA's future agriculture policy, it's proposed that following the meeting on the 26th of January, the comments of the Agriculture Liaison Group members would then be reflected in the Council's corporate draft response to the DAERA policy proposals, and that would be considered then. Council's response would then be tabled and considered at the February meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. So the recommendations are that the report of the Agricultural Liaison Group meeting, which is attached, is noted, and the recommendations as outlined are approved, including correspondence to the DAERA Minister seeking an update on the Department's proposals to provide support to the agriculture industry to offset financial pressures created by the production cost increases, and also the timeline for the Emerging Ammonia Action Plan. Write to the Minister for the Economy requesting an update on proposals to invest in the electricity grid so that it will be capable of facilitating connections to future green energy investment and production, and that meetings will take place on the 26th of January with the Chair of the DAERA Committee and on 3rd of March 22 with the Chief Executive of NIEA, and that the Agriculture Liaison Group contribute to the corporate response to DAERA's consultation on future agriculture policy proposals, and then the corporate response is brought to the February meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee for approval.
Thank you for that. First up is Councillor Wilson. Still unmuted, Councillor Wilson.
Chair, I would propose that we note that, but there was an invitation there by the member that was at the meeting to attend private seminars, or not, they weren't private, they were public seminars in Fermanagh, which I attended along with Councillor Rennie, and I attended another one at Mountfield since that similar. It makes a very grim story that a farmer who has 100 cattle or 100 sheep or both will have to slaughter 86 of those if this bill that we are listening to at the minute, Clare Bailey bill, if that goes through Stormont, that is the grim facts, and the industry will be in total collapse. The problem, I'm just wondering how many of the people or MLAs that support that go to Stormont on a bicycle or cancel their foreign holidays where the jets are making, creating more emissions than anything else. Just today, my grandson told me the cars and vehicles on the road have raised an increase of 225% of emissions over the last 20-30 years. Air passengers flying off to holidays, 575%. Atmospheric carbon, 50% for all of an increase. Yet the animal stock numbers are down by 5%. So I think we would need a lot more scientific evidence before we go down the line that has been going through at this minute in time. And listening to, there were quite a few MLAs, including our agricultural chairman there, and I think they really got their eyes opened when they seen the facts, and the farmers that were there were putting their story to them. I don't think the general public would really stand for it if there was a decree come out that a family, if they had 5 pets, would have to get 4 of them destroyed, and one would be all that would be allowed to keep. That's what's happening. I know a young lad here, when he was asked at Christmas what he wanted from Santa, he said he wanted a calf, and that's what he got. And that calf has no future, and he has no future in the industry either. So I think we are really need to sit down and look at, because there's no comeback from this, and the housewife will suffer more than anybody else, because she will be she'll not be fit to ring up the local supermarket and tell them to deliver food that has been delivered down the road in Northern Ireland. It won't be there. It'll be coming like our gas and heating oil from the other end of the world, and at whatever price they like to put at you, whatever quality they want to put at you, and that's it. Sorry for going on, Chair, but that's really the facts, and this is a serious matter that a lot of fire people I know don't want farmers, and it's quite obvious because the attitude that they have. And but I think it's going to be, it will, if it's approved, will be a total disaster, complete total disaster. And thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Bert. Next up, we have Councillor Josephine Deacon.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Kim, for your report. I'd like to second the noting of this report, Chair, but I do want to make a few comments. I agree with Councillor Wilson that we are facing an extremely critical time for the agricultural sector, and there are a number of very important bills coming up and proposals, including the future agricultural policy proposals for Northern Ireland in the context of the climate change bill, the ammonia action plan, the reinstatement of ANC payments, and the reality on the ground that farmers are facing hugely increased production costs for their produce, but not really getting a fair recompense for their work. But Chair, I do hope that Councillor Wilson's predictions do not come to fruition. And in fact, if this council does its job, and in particularly the agricultural liaison group, then hopefully we can ensure that there is a proper balance achieved. But there is no getting away from the fact that we have a climate emergency, and desperate situations require desperate actions. So I think this is all about compromise. It's about practicalities and finding pragmatic solutions to very difficult questions. So it won't be an easy process, but I am sure that this council will play its part, and indeed we have huge vested interest in the outcome of all these deliberations. But I want to thank him for a report and second the noting of it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mcinleader.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose when I listened to the first speaker, I'm a wee bit confused. I suppose it was my understanding that his party actually are supportive of the climate change bill, the first climate change bill that's going through.
Councillor Mcinleader, we're not going to bring politics into it, please, about parties.
Oh, this isn't the place for politics, that's right. I just, looking through the reports, I have a bit of a concern in relation to recommendation 1, part B, and it's to do with the future electricity grid, because I know through my own participation, my own involvement in the Planning Appeals Committee public inquiry up in Dorval here, that there's an issue there initially because there's an oversubscription to the grid at present, and when there's an excess of suppliers, or indeed an excess of electricity being produced by suppliers, the request then is sent out that they reduce their supply to the grid, and when they're not running at 100%, when they're running, for example, 60, 75%, they're actually entitled to claim an expense for that. So they're getting paid not to run, they're getting a benefit not to run at full percent. So I'm concerned that whilst there is, as some of the reports we've alluded to earlier on this evening in terms of the landscape capacity report, there seems to be, and I'm talking, I suppose, explicitly about my own DEA, but there's several neighbouring ones and many other councils will be fit to talk in their own areas. Quite a proliferation, quite an expanse of the likes of wind turbines in a particular area, and it seems to not correlate with the number of rural buildings and dwellings and businesses that are in that particular area. So I think there needs to be, whilst there's nobody here who's going to argue against green energy production and green energy investment, we need to look at where it's been sited, where it's been located, and indeed if it's to benefit our people here, or if it's to go off and power some large-scale industrial plant, if it's to power the East Coast, then again questions have to be asked about that. So I would just express a reservation in relation to that. I at this stage, and without being part of the agricultural liaison group, I wouldn't be able to support that particular recommendation. So just to sound a wee air of caution, or a wee note of caution in relation to that. Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you're dissenting from that. Just to Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up again. I'm not letting you back in again. No, no, Bert, no, don't
Yes.
make me mute you. Bert, don't make me mute you. I will. I'm not letting you back in again. I'm just going to clarify on Councillor Mcinleader's comments that some of our party MLAs supported the Clare Bailey bill, but not them all. Some of them were actually against it. So I'm leaving it at that. We will move on nextly to Councillor Corey.
Gormagad Carley wasn't intending to come in on this item, but I think there's some things that can't go past. First of all, sexist comments that was made there by Councillor Wilson about housewives and where you're doing this, that or the other. I just think we just need to really think more carefully about the way that we speak, and appreciate the maybe generational differences, but that's not an excuse. Just around the climate change bill, and you've outlined there that some of your party colleagues were in support of it and others weren't. The UUP signed up to it, as did every other party apart from the DUP. So all parties are co-signatories of that, and that's the facts. Councillor Wilson kept talking about facts. That's the facts. There are no sectoral targets. That's actually been a criticism of the co-signed bill from the environmental sector. So anybody who is out scaremongering on that in the community really needs to take a look at themselves. And I think that's really concerning when it's coming from organisations who are supposed to be a bit of an authority, such as the Ulster Farmers Union. The reality is, Chair, we are in a climate crisis. We all need to change. We need to change. Our entire society has to change. Agriculture will play a part in that, just like everybody else and just like every other sector. Construction and transport, I would say, are facing bigger changes, but everybody is going to have to. And as we've said in this chamber, Chair, and on the multiple consultations that we have responded to, our farmers have to be at the centre of it, have to be part of how we tackle this. We all need to eat. We have our farming system here is sustainable, in my opinion, for the most part. We have small family farms. They, as we've said here several times, are actually custodians of the environment in you know, hedgerows. They have the hedgerow maintenance. We're not big industrial farms like you'd find elsewhere. You've the peatlands, you've the management of those, and actually there have been reports done that have been informing different strategic levels on that seem to point that actually our small family farms are actually carbon neutral, if not actually carbon stores overall. And I think that that's all being looked at. We need to actually talk up our farmers and our farming community for the great work that they are doing to protect our environment. And I think it's really adding into a bit of scapegoating and a bit of scaremongering, and keep putting this as if it's the environment against farming. That's not the case. It shouldn't be the case, and it's really just unhelpful to hear that kind of rubbish repeated. Gormagat.
Councillor Anthony Feely.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say those excellent words from my colleague there, Siobhan Curry. She's covered what I would have tried to say, but she's covered it far better. Yeah, and first I want to make an apology. I missed that funeral on the 6th. Oh, sorry, missed the meeting on the 6th of January. I had to go to a funeral and I couldn't get out of it. But I like these meetings and look forward to the meeting with Declan McAleer on the 26th. But I was just going to kind of come on them thoughts, but Siobhan's covered it very well there, and totally agree with her. But I'm a farmer myself, and I would be a wee bit afraid of certain things there, but I know myself that something has to be done. Like, we have to do some kind of change. Like as Siobhan says, we're in the middle of a climate crisis here. Like, and I think that we have to work alongside these people instead of going against them. Like, because the land we own down here, a lot of it's very bad, and there's a lot of bog land. So I would say that some of my land will be good for the environment, with carbon sinks and all that there. Like, but I know where Bert's coming from there, but I think now he's exaggerating now very much so there when he said a guy had 5 pets and he'd have to get rid of 4 of them, and some guy had 100 cattle to cut down to 20 of that. It's not going to be as bad as all that. Well, I wouldn't be as I'd be more of a look to the future, more brighter than that. Like, because my young fella, same as Bert's grandson there, has a pet goat and a pet donkey, as long as the cat we keep, like, and I'd say we still have them when all this has changed. So I think there's a lot of scaremongering going on there, but just want to totally agree with everything Siobhan said and how she got it across the world there. So thank you.
Councillor O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's we need to be accurate. Like, obviously the UUP initially supported the Clare Bailey Act, but I think they've now done a U-turn. So all the parties, I think, in Stormont are failing to take forward the sort of measures we need on this issue. All both of the acts that are before the Assembly fail to actually engage with in any participative way either workers or farmers. The idea of a just transition is nowhere to be found.
Agreed.
It's based upon experts on high imposing things not connected to the realities of ordinary working class people's lives, and it's not going to work. People are not going to stand for that. They need to be involved. The Stormont has pumped hundreds of millions of pounds into gas infrastructure at the very time they're calling on farmers to basically shut down production over time. And even today, I think it's not just Stormont. The entire markets are actually undermining production. As we know, the price farmers receive is below the cost of producing it. In recent days, we've seen Moy Park shut down a new kill line in Ballymena, which processes or kills 300,000 chickens a week. The consequences of that, I think, will be that we'll see a lot of jobs not lost over time, but they'll not be lost because people won't be filling them, because there's a labour shortage, because these companies, which are making huge profits, Moy Park made £86 million up on the previous year in 2020. They aren't going to pay workers to do anything to attract them in the context of post-Brexit, so they'll actually shut down production. The consequences of that will be for farmers who are supplying those same birds will not have a market for their birds. So I well understand as a trade unionist and as a labour representative where the farmers are coming from in this, because I think that they too are being squeezed by the same market forces which are squeezing working class people. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, we've had the recommendations proposed and seconded. I think Councillor McAleer was going to present.
I was accused of being sexist.
Bert,
yes,
I warned everybody at the start of the meeting that anybody bust in like that there I was going to mute everybody permanently again that they couldn't do it. So please don't come in like that over the chair. We have discussed this and we have a proposer and seconded. We're going to move on. Thank you. So we've had it proposed and seconded with Councillor Mcinleader dissenting. Is everybody else happy with this?
No.
Who said no? Bert, okay. We've had it proposed and seconded with 2 people dissenting, Councillor Mcinleader and Councillor Wilson. Okay, we're moving on to item 5.8, and that is to consider the report on the meeting of the Broadband Working Group held on the 15th of December 2021.
Thank you, Chair. So the Broadband Working Group met on the 15th of December. The notes are attached to this report as Appendix 1, and at the meeting a presentation was provided by the Department of the Economy and Fibrous in respect of Project Stratum. A number of key points have been set out at paragraph 2.1. Just also to note the DFE announcement yesterday on the basis of the funding confirmation in respect of the Department of Finance sign-off. And that now will allow the inclusion of an additional 8,500 premises in the Project Stratum rollout, which will extend project delivery by a year. Within FODC, this will benefit an additional 1,407 premises, bringing the total number of premises connected to 16,228. And overall, it's expected that 99% of properties will be connected. There will be approximately 1,538 premises which are not included in current plans, including 892 premises served by WISPs or wireless internet service providers, and 646 premises which were previously included in BT Openreach commercial build plans which have since been removed from those plans, and we were informed that further options are being considered to connect those properties. The following actions were agreed so that the Council make representations to Openreach to seek clarity in relation to the removal of those 646 premises within the district from its commercial rollout plans, and to request the reconsideration of that decision and that it's reversed, and also representation to Ofcom in relation to the need for service providers to provide improved public access to information in terms of their investment plans. And it's recommended that the Council approves the actions as outlined at paragraph 2.2.
Okay, first up on this is Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. And before I propose the recommendation, I just want to welcome the expansion of the project to include the 8,500 additional properties. You know, it's something that we've been continuing to push to include as many of those properties that have been left out of Project Stratum, to encourage, you know, all homeowners and all businesses to be able to benefit from fibre to the premises. So it's fantastic news. And I'd also like to encourage anyone whose house previously had been excluded from the Project Stratum scheme to keep an eye on the Hyperfast NI website and to check, has their postcode been updated and included in the scheme. That's what's been recommended by Fibrous, just to keep an eye, and that it'll be updated as and when they can. But they're continuing to review those premises that are excluded, and will work with Openreach to try and reach solutions. So I think it's a very positive report, and I very much welcome it. Thank you.
Councillor Baird.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure, like many other councillors and many members of the public, we got correspondence last week from Fibrous inviting us to take up their offer of £39.99 to achieve 100 megabits download. I got one here to my address, and obviously telling me that I'm eligible. I took the opportunity to phone them today and listened to some more information. £39.99 refers to 100 megabits, £49.99 will be for 300, and £59.99 will be for 1,000. Now, one of the questions I asked them was where their call centre would be, because I can anticipate us as public representatives going to have problems whenever the uptake starts. And I did say I'd get through reasonably easily with them today. They did assure me that their call centre will remain in Belfast.
They did mention, as an aside, that other providers, as they are wholesalers of the product, other providers will be coming on board. So I'm holding back a bit to see what else there is. But the purpose of my comment is to add a recommendation that we write to Fibrus, asking them to establish an elected members hotline, as we have for NIE and NI Water, so that we can work effectively on behalf of our constituents and not of the problems that we have with other civil service departments that we've highlighted in the past. So I would like to make that as a proposal and hope that someone will second it. And as a very much an aside, the correspondence came to me as the occupier 4 Dairies Road, Enniskillen, BT 9370R. There was no town land included. So if my recommendation that we write to Fibrus about the establishment of an elected members hotline, we remind them of our requirement to have town land included in our addresses and what the legal position is on that. So I leave it at that. I would hope I would get a seconder for those 2 aspects. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to second the actual?
Well, more than happy to, yes, with the proviso that my recommendation is taken on board with the 2 points: the elected members hotline and the inclusion of town lands. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, next up we have Councillor Mcinleader.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I have no problem seconding those proposals. I think it's a sensible suggestion, and hopefully there is a helpline that the customers can easily contact Fibrus, because I know I have had a couple of queries and questions raised this very week in relation to ongoing installation. And just given the fact that our next broadband meeting isn't until, I think it's penciled in provisionally at the end of February, I would like to make a proposal tonight that, given I suppose some concerns that have been raised with me in relation to the erection of poles for this service within the Sperrins area of outstanding natural beauty, that we maybe contact Fibrus just to clarify what the plan is here, because I know there's a bit of confusion about where there would be underground cabling and where there were to be overground poles and cabling. This is obviously something that maybe impacts on our own planning department, so it might do no harm to contact our planning department just to follow up on this. I can give the details in terms of the address. I'm happy enough to do that, but it's an area where there aren't poles currently, and that other utilities are serviced underground. And again, when the people were on the ground, when the contractors were on the ground, they seemed to be there. They were just doing what they were asked to do. So there was a bit of confusion, a bit of reluctance on their behalf to take on the concerns of the people, the local residents there. So I'd make that as a proposal, Chair, that we contact both our own planning department and Fibrus just to follow up on those concerns that have been raised. The second thing I'd like to do is to formally propose that we invite the Auditor General, Kieran Donnelly, down to present to Council, because his report on the concerns, I suppose, over the number of properties which were covered by the Project Stratum scheme was released just in or around the time of our last meeting, and we didn't get I suppose a proper chance to discuss that, just given the fact that it had been released maybe the day before, maybe the day of that last particular meeting. So I think just given the findings and the information that has come out about that since, I would be very interested to request that the Auditor General presented either formally or informally to the Council, just to give us a bit of background, a bit of more detail on his findings. So I'd like to make that as a proposal too, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up we have Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I'm not particularly happy about this. I believe I read somewhere that recent announcement that was made yesterday or the day before is a reworking of an announcement that was made in October. But I stand to be corrected on that. The other thing, I was looking at my own particular road because that's the one that I know about. People at both ends of the road are on the list. The people up the road from one end to the other aren't on the list. It's truly shocking. I would propose that we write the Fibres and the Department of Economy as standing as funding it, who asked them that the original list of postcodes is reinstated in full, because they've made a complete ham's fist of it. Because I've been talking to different people where their neighbours at each side are on the list, but they aren't. So something needs to be done, or we'll end up like the voucher scheme that we had. We'll have people screaming at us of the absurdity of both their neighbours having it, but them not having it. So I would propose that, and I would ask them, also add into the letter just how ridiculous it is that neighbours at both sides is on the list and somebody in the middle isn't.
Okay, next up we have Councillor Bernice Swift.
Magad Cairlock, and I can second both Councillor Mcinleader's and Councillor Green's proposals there. Happy to do that. And yeah, I'm not just as excited as some of the media mainstream have been in reporting the news yesterday, because at the very beginning of this, Fibres did give the assurance of 100% rollout. And I did hear it, and I did receive it confirmed to me also. So I do still think it's unfair that basically what a repeat of information that was provided so long ago is now seen to be a big thing to be praised. Well, it's not. We should be having this as of right. Significant investment has been provided and the state aid accordingly. So just get the broadband in and get it in quickly as the hyper-fast solution that it's supposed to be. And I have to say, fair play to all the people who fought back for this service, who are entitled and should be eligible for it. And as other councillors have already pointed out, a few neighbours up and down a road receiving it and others being bypassed. I'm in that situation myself, and so was indeed the Derrigonley Harps Club who wanted to be connected. Now, I need far more speed than they're even providing. You know, really, you know, this is nearly like a 19th century solution to what should be 21st century and 22nd century requirements. The speeds that they're providing in the national broadband is really what we should be seeking and achieving indeed. Now, I am grateful for the email address that Kim provided in the correspondence today from Fibres, and I suppose that's their way around a hotline. But anyway, I want to ask Kim if they did provide any further feedback on their proposed broadband ambassador, and perhaps that was supposed to be our direct point of contact, which would be extremely useful, because I can expect still to be some issues with the design build bypassing people who really do require broadband connection. Gurmagad.
Okay, Councillor Anthony Feely.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief. And I was at that meeting, and we had a good discussion with the Fibres fellas that day, and I had a few issues about, as Emmett was saying, about poles being too close to the road. And they cut trees beside poles that were leaving and left a mess after them. But fair play that they got back to me after that meeting, and they got some of the issues sorted out. But I'm similar to Bernice and Seamus there on my road, and there's only 7 houses on my road altogether, and I look, 2 of us is not getting it. I checked last night again with the postcode, and that new correspondence came out, so I'm still not on it. But they told us that day at the meeting for anybody in that situation to email them directly and see, can we get on? I know we shouldn't have to do that, but that's what I'd encourage people to do, and I'm going to do that myself. It's going to look very bad if a lot of people around here has it, and I'm on the broadband working group and a local councillor, and I haven't got it. They'd be saying, your man's a good councillor, he can't even get broadband for himself, so it's a major issue for me, so I'll have to get it, you know. But I know I have Net 1, and because BT didn't work, and that's the problem. Anybody that has it on Net 1 isn't coming up that is strong enough, so they're not getting it. So we have to email them and get it ourselves. But I know it's hard, but we'd have to do stuff like that. We shouldn't be fit to do that, but that's what we have to do. But fair play to Alex, and that'd be a good idea if we had a number that we could ring directly, and getting the townlands under this would be very good as well. But there is a few issues there, but hopefully we'll be fit to get them ironed out.
Thank you. Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to develop a slightly different angle. I think that this, the way that this has been rolled out, the problems that have resulted, I think demonstrates the failure that is associated with reliance on the market and the sort of way that Stormont has approached this issue. I note on page 2 that there were originally 892 premises which were excluded, served by other wireless internet service providers, which are obviously low-grade broadband access. But then an additional 646 premises, which were previously included in BT Openreach build plans, were excluded. And so this is basically BT thumbing their nose at the fact that they didn't obtain this contract. And that's it across the board. I understand that they are now no longer investing in rural areas as a result of not getting this contract. For its part, I understand from workers that Fibrous is not only providing the bit that they're contracted to, but they're actually going out of their way to try and compete for BT in along streets where it's more profit making. And actually, I have heard from residents in places like Newtown Butler that they're fed up of people knocking on the door asking if they'll change their broadband provider. And it has to be said that Fibrous is only a couple of years now to deploy the broadband network with the money that they've been given by Stormont to rural, hard-to-reach areas. But as they see it, like BT, they're trying to make quick wins, more profits, and competing over the same territory, really, and that's what's happening. And indeed, in Lisnaskea, I understand that the subcontractors hired by both BT Openreach and by Fibrous were actually working on the same poles at the same time because of the overlap. This is the sort of efficiency that we're getting under market forces that Stormont is relying upon. There's a lot of talk, obviously, around 165 million, but the reality is the job creation that was ascribed to it has not happened. My understanding is that all the subcontractors working, certainly in Fermanagh, enter the county and leave it every day. So there's absolutely no benefit in terms of local employment. There was no effort made by Stormont to actually create some or to benefit from that employment. There was no local training centre or link up in the area with to upskill locals in fibre jointing, which is a highly transferable skill. So no benefit in terms of employment. And it just yet again highlights how the market failure works its way out when it comes to places like Fermanagh and Tyrone, where they're last on the grid, and we end up having money thrown at projects which end up going to the most profitable, and those who are excluded from that suffer the costs, and they will continue. We will continue to live with the consequences of this failure from Stormont for many years to come, because our businesses, our society will lag behind. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Next we have Councillor John Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for coming to the meeting late, but could I, when we're writing back to Fibrous, for our data scientists, could we ask for the addresses or postcodes so that we have that for the next broadband working group to see how many out of the 8,500 are within the Fermanagh and Ohm area, because like this, and many councillors have spoken before, it is about, it was always about value for money. It was never about the people in the greatest need, and the people in Fermanagh and Omer were always in the greatest need of broadband. I concur with Councillor O'Coffey that local employment, I don't think there has been many, young men or women employed to roll it out, and a huge amount of money. We think that there should have been benefit to the local community as well. But I think that information that I request is vitally important for the next broadband working group, and it would help the data scientist. Thank you.
Maybe if I could just clarify that the, out of the 8,500 additional premises, there will be 1,407 that are located in the Mananoma district.
Okay, thank you for that, Kim. Next up, we have Councillor Barry McElduff.
Just briefly, Chair, it's a related matter. Fibrous, I have reason for this, of course. Can I propose that this council write to Fibrous and seek assurance that whenever Fibrous enters an area to do street works or road works, that they feed that into the DFA roads management system. It's a system called Simology, and it allows DFA roads to properly manage and, if possible, coordinate works that are going to take place at a given time. So the way I would like to phrase this is I propose that we seek assurance from Fibrous that they subscribe to this practice on all occasions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and the final speaker on this is Councillor McCaffrey.
Gurmagad Clarley, thank you, Chair, and I'll just second Councillor McElduff's proposal. I think that would be very prudent. For all the speakers have outlined very good points, and I mean, like, I would reserve my judgment on this until we see how it's actually being rolled out. But I recently was speaking to both Fibrous and BT employees, and also to local constituents who are experiencing a lot of frustration at the moment. I had it pointed out to me recently by one of these constituents about the difference in price. Some rural dwellers are now being forced. There may be no other option between Fibrous or BT, and if they're going with the Fibrous option, you're looking at costs of in around £40 a month for a service that can be is offered in Belfast for £27 or £25. So the difference in cost, we're not only the last to get these services, we're also paying more for it. So I think that is hugely disgraceful for people of our district. And surely there's rural inequality there, and how can these kind of things be rural proofed when it's a matter of fact that not only we don't get the services in time, we also are paying more for them than city and urban dwellers. So just to make that point, and also then to second Councillor McElduff's proposal. Gurmagad.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, you've heard several items proposed and seconded, including the broadband working group report. Is everybody happy? Okay, thank you for that. We will move on to item 5.9, which is to consider an update report on the Covet Recovery Small Settlements Regeneration Programme.
Chair. So this report is an update on the Covet Recovery Small Settlements Regeneration Programme being progressed in conjunction with 3 government departments, and is an update on the reports brought to committee in December, so further to consideration at the December R&C committee, and then subsequently at the December P&R committee. Council did submit a small settlement regeneration investment plan for the district. That included 13 outstanding projects on the Village Renewal Framework, alongside a proposed extension to the ongoing project in Newton Butler, and inclusive of a vacant to occupied scheme and a screenage frontage improvement scheme at derelict sites. And it was further agreed at the December R&C meeting that we would open a call for proposals for town village enhancement schemes, with the budget allocation to be determined based on the eligibility of projects already identified. So further to that, responses have been received from each of the 3 departments, and those are included at agenda item 4.1, which was matters arising from last R&C meeting. And officers have also met with DFC officials who advised that the Council's plan would be assessed by the Strategic Oversight Group, and a response was expected. That has just come in this evening, and I have attached to the other correspondence in your papers. So in terms of the correspondence that matters arising, we have 2 items of correspondence from the Department for Communities, 2 from the Department for Infrastructure, and 1 from the DAERA Minister, with key points including that DFC has responsibility for urban regeneration. It has a policy of adhering to the NISRA definition of an urban settlement, which is a for settlements with a population of 5,000 and above. This program is a new program. Its purpose is to stimulate post-pandemic economic recovery of commercial centres of rural towns and villages and to encourage active travel. It's not for the broader rural area, but it has a focus on settlements. It's separate from any other rural development initiatives and has different criteria. DAERA provides funding to ongoing village renewal schemes, which are currently being delivered, and it plans to bring forward other initiatives to replace the Rural Development Programme and continues to support initiatives such as TRIPSY and other pilots, for example, the recent Rural Halls Programme. The correspondence notes there's no plans to review the funding methodology or the current allocations, and that the programme overall is not designed to support projects outside of rural settlements. Also, the correspondence from the Department for Communities Director received this evening has been circulated. It follows on from the initial review of our plan by the Strategic Oversight Group and is asking for clarity on a range of the projects which we have included in our plan from a value for money perspective, primarily just to ensure that they link with the programme objectives and because they are based mainly on smaller settlements. It's advising that projects at Coyle, Brookborough and Greencastle are ineligible based on the criteria provided. And it's also advising of additional allocations, including the capital element is now increased to 1.96 million and the revenue allocation is increased to 141,000, which is an allocation of 2.1 million in total. Then the council's 10% contribution to be added. And they have asked us to reconsider our plan and submit a revised plan by the 31st of January 2022. So that covers most of the correspondence. In terms of the key issues, now that we have received confirmation that the 3 schemes are ineligible, there will be a need to resubmit our plan, and it's proposed at the bottom of page 2 that we incorporate 4 funding streams. I have put indicative budget allocations against those, but those will now need to be revised in light of this evening's correspondence and the additional contributions that have been provided. So it is recommended that the council submits a revised programme based on the interventions and budget allocations outlined in paragraph 2.4, noting that the correspondence has confirmed the ineligibility of the projects at Coyle, Brookborough and Greencastle, and that the additional allocation is directed towards support for the additional town village enhancements open call element, which is part 4 of our funding outline. Chair.
Councillor Feely.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kim, for that. Yeah, and it's great for them. 13 areas that it's going to get funding, but it's kind of disappointing for Coyle, Brookborough, and Greencastle that it's not eligible now. It's very, very disappointing, and them projects will shove already. So I'm happy to propose the recommendation. But I was going to make another proposal as well, outlining them 3 that isn't going to get a Coyle, Brookborough, and Greencastle, that the council could use some of the Covet recovery fund finance to finance them 3 projects. I'd like to make that a proposal.
Okay, Councillor Michael Duff.
I think, Chair, we're having a very fundamental council look at rural vitality and not just definitions of rurality that come from urban places. It's from the bottom up. It's from the country in towards the settlements. So I would be of a mind till second Councillor Feely's proposal.
Okay, thank you. Wait, that came in here.
Chair, I'm not clear on what our budget position is in respect of COVID recovery funds and the availability of any funds at the moment in respect of those 3 projects, and also the eligibility. Should there be funding available, the eligibility of those projects against the provided. So that is something we would certainly need to look at. I suppose another point that I would make is that subject to all of the other projects being approved in terms of our resubmitted plan, should additional village funding or DAERA funding become available, then those 3 projects that are ineligible would, I suppose, be at the top of the list in terms of future village schemes. And that's something that we can look towards in working with DAERA as well.
Okay, Councillor Sean Clark.
Chair, I was probably going to second Anthony's proposal, but Barry has already done that, so I think it's disappointing, but so that's all really I'm going to say, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Eamon Keenan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yeah, I suppose disappointing for the villages that didn't get it, but very happy to see Newtown Butler has been included and it's going to get some funding for more funding for the village renewable. Yeah, so fully support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mcinleader.
Yes, Chair, sorry, just to declare a declaration of interest in relation to recommendation 8.1 as a member of Greencastle St Patrick's Club. So just to put that on record. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
You've heard the item 5.9 proposed and seconded. Is everybody happy? Okay, thank you. We will now move on to item number 6. Which
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. There was a proposal proposed and seconded there too. Is it now going to be dealt with? Chair, I'm not sure whether you can hear me or not.
I can hear you loud and clear. We're just getting clarity here. Councillor Green.
Chair, there was a proposal by Councillor Bailey to support the recommendations and also that we use COVID-19 recovery funding to look at the 3 projects. And that was seconded by Councillor McElduff. I've noted that we can certainly bring a report back, but there will be issues that need to be considered in terms of firstly, whether there's funding available, and secondly, should there be funding available, whether the projects would be eligible in respect of the use of that funding. So a report will be brought back.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that has been passed or not, because I always thought a proposal and second proposed and seconded had to go to the council for agreement. So I presume that has been passed and that Kim is going to do some work on the proposal because Kim proposed and seconded. Is that what we're understanding? Yeah.
Yeah, Kim is nodding here. Yes. Okay. We will now move on to the Community and Wellbeing Director reports. The first one is 6.1, which is to consider a report on events and festivals 21-22. John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, the 3 elements to the report. One is to provide members with an update of the event strategy working group, and the minutes are included at Appendix 1. The second is in relation to St. Patrick's Day celebrations in Omagh. Members may remember that Dunolla had become a delivery partner, and we had approved that at a previous meeting in relation to St. Patrick's Day Festival. You will see there at 2.2.2 that there are 2 options in relation to the nature of the celebrations. One with St. Patrick's Day Parade with a main stage and musical entertainment and entertainment in the Struil Arts Centre. And option 2 at the St. Patrick's Day Festival in Omagh Town and the Struil Arts Centre, but also involving the local community and the arts and the music groups and the publicans, and a more holistic approach to the celebration of St. Patrick's Day. The Event Strategy Working Group agreed on option 2 for the Omagh and just approval is sought in relation to that. In relation to the Project St. Patrick and its event celebrations, There was a sponsorship agreement has been issued to Project St. Patrick, and also discussing and engaging with the Project St. Patrick in relation to the nature of the event given COVID. There was a meeting planned for early in January of this year before deciding on the exact details of the delivery model of St. Patrick's Day Parade. I am aware that that meeting has taken place since this report was written, and that there will indeed be a plan for delivery of a celebration of St. Patrick's Day, a community celebration in the town of Enniskillen, but further details of that will come to a future meeting. So therefore, Chair, it's recommended that the Council notes the draft minutes and recommendations of the Event Strategy Working Group and approves the option 2 for St. Patrick's Day Festival in Omagh. Notes update on St. Patrick's Day, and also Chair approves the lighting of Enniskillen Castle and Stool Arts Centre Green on St. Patrick's Day.
Okay, we have no speakers indicating. Can I have it's lighting up like a Christmas tree? First up is Councillor Blake.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. I'm happy to propose it. Definitely, all these things around St. Patrick's Day sounds very positive. What isn't listed though in the report, I was kind of wondering. I see there's 23,000. Am I correct in that, John, regarding the cost of the St. Patrick's Day Festival in Enniskillen? Is there any associated cost then with Omagh? Because I think was it agreed previously that both would be sharing similar costs? So it was just that would be the question around that. But happy to propose as is, Chair.
Yeah, yes, Chair. Probably an omission from the report, and apologies for that. 23,000 also allocated to the Dunolla, or the sponsorship arrangement with Dunolla. That would be the plan.
Councillor Garvey.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, John. Thanks to the Events Working Group as well. I know these small groups have to do a lot of work that goes unnoticed a lot of the time, but I would just like to second the recommendation at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Matthew Bell.
Yes, I'd like to also just voice support for the proposal, but I had 2 questions that maybe John will be able to answer for me. In the Appendix 2, I thought those 2 pieces of real information kind of left out. First, how many people are you expected to attend Omagh? And secondly, will there be an opportunity for the community to feed back into it? Just like any of these big events, I think it always having a post-event review and having community feedback into the event will always be a benefit. Thanks.
Chair, in relation to the numbers who are attending, we are in discussions at this point in time with Dunolla in relation to the event and the expected numbers and so on. I suppose this event hasn't taken place in this format for quite a while, so we will be just expecting, just with those discussions with Dunolla, and indeed in feeding. I suppose it's a 2-way process coming from the community about what the expectations are in Omagh in as to the numbers that are attending. With regard to the feedback and indeed the engagement with the community is absolutely vital in relation to the celebration of these events and the participation of the community. So the engagement and the communication and the feedback with the community will be a central point of the plans with Dunolla and indeed with Project St. Patrick.
Okay, Councillor Bernice Swift.
Yeah, Garamag, and thank you, John, for clarifying some of the points. And I suppose it is unfortunate about there being a lack of enthusiasm to get involved from local community groups and indeed businesses to support and promote the event. And I suppose naturally the uncertainty of COVID restrictions feed into that also. And indeed, I suppose what time and commitment and effort people can give and provide to such an event. But all that said, I'm fully supportive and I commend this lovely colourful brochure. It all looks like great excitement and colour and fun. And I wouldn't like to think any negativity would be coming forward. So very well done to all involved thus far. Garmagat.
Okay, you've heard it proposed and seconded that we accept the recommendations on 6.1. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, We'll move on to 6.2, which is to consider report on the proposal of the use of additional funding from the Department of Communities, paper K.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Department of Communities has allocated the Council two additional elements of funding. One, just over 50 or 52,500 towards Covet financial inclusion. And the proposals in relation to that is to provide 20,000 of that made to advice providers to extend the provision that they currently support. In addition to that, there are two conferences which are taking place in this financial year, the Age Friendly Conference and the Poverty Conference, and it's proposed that the allocation of 10,000 towards those two projects coming from this fund also. It's further proposed that there would be a targeted programme focusing on household financial well-being to be developed with the family support hubs. We all know about the difficulties in managing finances, and I suppose it's particularly important in these times, given the whole fuel costs and the importance of managing finances in order to meet those needs. And so the way it is proposed that a pilot program will be run for 7 weeks, and it will cover a range of topics, the energy efficiency, healthy eating, and a range of life skills, I suppose, in a sense, that will help, and they can avail of short courses in order to develop those skills. The total cost of that program is estimated to be at around £12,000. And then for the remainder, we will work with the community and voluntary sector, including the credit unions, to identify further opportunities to promote financial inclusion. I suppose we are under a bit of pressure in relation to the timescale of this. Money is to be spent before the end of the financial year, so that gives a very short period of time in order to develop proposals and develop plans. The other funding which has been allocated, 97,000, has been made available to support the development of the social supermarket model. Members will be aware that it's been mentioned here a number of times in the Chamber in relation to the pilot schemes which have been running in a number of council areas, Derry City and Strabane, the pilot scheme for the development of social supermarkets. And this is all about the funding is really to support the co-design process and the capacity building for the implementation of social supermarket. The social supermarket model isn't one which can be lifted from one area, such as in Derry City and Strabane and what they do there, compared to what we have in our district. We are, I suppose, a different district in terms of rurality, and the needs of our community are slightly different. So in order to meet those, we have sent out an expression of interest to identify the potential pilot projects and those that are important within the district and who would be interested in taking part in a social supermarket model. And they will be considered by the co-design group at the next meeting at the end of January, and a report will be brought to a future meeting. Therefore, Chair, it's recommended that the Council approves the allocation of 20,000 to the two general advice providers, approves the expenditure of 10,000 to support the provision of the two conferences, approves 12,000 to support the delivery of the two pilot programs in the Omagh and Fermanagh area with the family support hubs, and also the continued work with the community and voluntary sector for the remainder of the money, and also notes the social supermarket fund allocation. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deacon.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank John for his detailed report and for the work that his team has put into drawing up this proposal. I certainly welcome the provision of this additional funding from the Department of Communities, and Chair, I'm sure members will agree that it is much needed. I have to commend the work of the advice services who work tirelessly supporting people through major financial crises, particularly during the pandemic. I think that this is a fair allocation of the funding. I think it's also appropriate that we should provide financial support to those conferences upcoming and I know that there will be a lot of interest in those conferences, and will provide very valuable information to all interested parties. So I welcome the report and happy to propose it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Curry.
Gormagat Cairley and Gormagat John for the report, and I think they are all worthwhile projects, and just like to acknowledge the additional funding from the Department for Communities. It seems we get notification every month of more funding. Just like to congratulate the Minister for that. It's hard times we're living in. I'm just wondering, John, and I'm happy to second actually the recommendations, but I'm just wondering in terms of the other funding that's available there, after the allocation to the other areas that you've outlined, would there be any possibility or any scope for including the likes of like community allotment schemes? I know I've met with you previously and so to grow their own, so I'm just wondering if that could be considered under that, and I'm sure you'll take a look at it if you can, if it can be, but just to make that point, Chair. Gormagat.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, no doubt the community allotment scheme, it is, and I know we have discussed this, it is very much part of the social supermarket model in the Derry City and Strabane district council area, so it is certainly something we would be looking under that heading also. But yeah, certainly is something that we can look at for that. I think there's an extra 10,000 that is available there. So, and I think we have allocated money under the community general support grant scheme that is included. You'll see there the table at 1.3. Some of that money has gone towards the allotment scheme also. So yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, you've heard it proposed and seconded, the report. Everybody happy? Okay, we will move on now to the reports, and as per usual, these reports are for information only. There'll be no discussion on them. If you have any questions on them, refer to the relevant directors after the meeting. So the first one is 7.1, is to note the update report on the funded programme paper L.
Chair, so this report gives an update on progress in relation to the Rural Development Programme, the Aspire Programme, Peace 4, Biz Mentors and TRIPSY, Rural Business Development Grant Scheme, and the detail in respect of each of them is outlined within the report. It's recommended that the Council notes the progress updates in respect of each individual programme.
Okay, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Buchanan, can I have a seconder? Councillor Robert Irvine, thank you. We'll move on to 7.2, and that's to note the report of the Director of Regeneration and Planning, paper M.
Thank you, Chair. And again, this is just for information in terms of acceptance of letter of offer and letter of variance, and a number of them are outlined at section 2 of the report, and it's recommended the Council notes the acceptance of the letters of offer, letter of variance and letters of comfort.
Again, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor McPhillips and Councillor Dehan, thank you. We will move on now to the Community and Wellbeing Directorate reports. And the first one is to note the report on the Environmental Health Delegated Decision, record Q3, October, November, December 21, paper N.
Yes, Chair. Just notes the quarterly report from Environmental Health Delegated Decisions. It's just there for the Council for noting.
Okay, proposed by Councillor Armstrong. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mary Garrity, thank you. And finally, to note the report of the Director of Community and Wellbeing.
Yes, Chair. There are two elements two elements to this report. One is in relation to, and both I think I've come across from previous meetings, in relation to leisure centre maintenance, and it gives the details of the types of leisure centre maintenance that come on or that take place, and just to remind members that during COVID, the maintenance regime at the leisure centres did continue in operation. Just in relation to, there was a specific mention to Oma Leisure Complex and the steam room and the sauna facilities as to the maintenance of them. And these facilities were closed and continue to be closed because social distancing can't be guaranteed in those areas in the leisure complex, and we will go in line with COVID-19 regulations in relation to the opening of them. But during that period, the sauna and steam room in Oma was continued to be inspected and maintained, and indeed minor works were completed on the area, including the retailing of the steam room and upgrading of the seating and the lighting in the sauna. The next part of the report just highlights the economic appraisal process for the 4G pitch in the Oma area. Just to update members that a consultant has been appointed to undertake the feasibility study and the economic appraisal, and it's hoped to bring a report when that process is completed, hopefully, and I'd be confident enough in April of this year.
Hello, can you hear me, Chair? Chair, I lost sound there from your end. I'm not sure if you had gone to me there. There's some wee sound issues at this end, anyway, maybe not for other councillors.
Sorry, no, I'm not going to anybody. I'm not taking any speakers on this, Councillor McElduff. They're for noting only, and if you have any queries on it, contact the relevant directors. And I did take you as proposing that, and Councillor Swift as seconding it. So we're moving on now.
Chairman, point of order.
What is your point of order?
Chairman, I would like, because certainly when we brought this up last year about reports and I have clarified this with the Chief Executive, when this was initially brought up, that reports were coming labelled for information purposes only, there was an agreement that there was opportunity, if required, to ask questions on these reports. So I'm making the proposal here, Chairman, that clarification is sought from the Chief Executive as to the ability of chairs to rule that nobody can speak on these things. It is not within standing orders, Chair, and I'm making that as a proposal that we bring back information that clarifies this.
With respect, Councillor O'Reilly, I haven't ruled that anybody can't speak on them. I'm saying that they can come back afterwards to the relevant director and get any updates or any information that they want on them.
With respect, Chair, the point I'm making here is that we come to council committee meetings and council meetings to have open and transparent verification and questioning of things, not done behind the scenes. And I have made this point on a number of occasions, and I still hold my proposal, Chair, that we do seek this. And I have checked this with the Chief Executive, Chair, before I have raised this issue. So there is certainly, at the very least, ambiguity as to the correct procedure. We are all subject to the standing orders of our own council. If we want to deviate from those standing orders, we need to change them, you know. Can't have them and then not abide by them.
I certainly, okay, I'm taking your proposal. I'm not going to open this up. Councillor O'Coffey, you are indicating there. Are you going to second Councillor O'Reilly's proposal?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to second it. I think that it's a point that I've made and others have made, and I'm glad to hear it made again. The basic idea of democracy, or at least representative democracy, is that there is a degree of openness and accountability over as much as conceivably possible of the functions of government, so that people can have a confidence in the representative decisions, or at least disagree with them, but at least know what they stand for and different people, and then they know what they're voting for the next election. So I think I'm certainly, I would be very happy to second that. I think we need clarification on that. We need to see how all decisions can be held as far as possible into full public accountability in the public domain, with the press present, and so on and so forth. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I certainly resent the fact that we're not acting in the light of democracy, but I think certainly would have made it clear, and it's worked all right, that if anybody had any questions on the report, but I'm happy enough for this question to be brought forward again. Councillor Gannon, I'm going to let you in, but very briefly.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'd just like to point to its Standing Order 19.13, which does state that with any proposal, and I would assume that include a proposal to note that council members are allowed an interaction of no more than 3 minutes. Now, I appreciate, Chair, you're obviously trying to get through business, and we quite often have discussions that are circular, or that on items to be noted that will not lead to any results for our constituents, but I have to agree with the previous two councillors, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on.
Excuse me, Victor, I had indicated, and just before I would second it, you see, it would be that point that John has made, and I was going to make the request at 2.1.5 on the steam room and sauna facilities. Given the update on the news this evening on restrictions being relaxed in England, Wales and Scotland, I would ask, could the Fermanagh Lakeland Forum and Oma Leisure Centre not proceed with the close down of the sauna facilities and steam room facilities, but bearing in mind very strongly the social distancing rule and guideline, but that I suppose an implementation could be made that only one person at any time be in either the steam room or the sauna. That's operational in most other facilities right across, and I think that would be a good enough practice, and very much bearing in mind the restrictions of social distancing, but that people would respect if a poster was placed on either the steam room or the sauna plant, to just stick with one person. I was hoping to make that as a recommendation for consideration for the members. Like, after all, people are paying for the services, and it is a very nice add-on. So John's thoughts on that, please, bearing in mind the updates this evening on the news. Gurmagat.
Yeah, Chair, I suppose the regulations this evening don't pertain as far as to ourselves here in this region, but it is something we can consider. It is something that I think that we can discuss with other CLOA members in relation to what is happening in other leisure centres across the region. And it's something that we don't actually want to go out on a limb ourselves. Normally, these decisions like this are taken at a very regional level. So it is something that we can and we will discuss with other CLOA members.
Okay. I am now going to look for a proposal to go into committee. Councillor Gannon, Councillor Irvine. Can we please switch? John to get an update on our discussions in when we get them. It's on again, yeah. We'll now go over to John to get an update on what was discussed in confidential.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, while in committee, the Council considered the confidential minutes of the 14th of December and there were no matters arising. And they also considered a report on a public right-of-way investigation and agreed with the recommended course of action. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I have a proposer and seconder for that report, please? Councillor Irvine, Councillor Thornton, thank you. With your indulgence, councillors, I'm going to try to get this meeting finished. And, well, I'll leave it for another couple of minutes before I look to extend a half an hour. We're now going over to correspondence, and the first item is a letter from DFE, and I'll go over to John.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is in response to a letter in relation to the establishment of an energy cost scheme from which was requested from the Department for the Economy. Department for the Economy highlights the Department for Communities has lead responsibility for fuel poverty, and in effect, query should be addressed to them.
Councillor Bale.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to propose the noting of this letter, but on the back of it, I would like to make a proposal, if you allow me. This council last month unanimously passed a motion brought forward by my party, those unionists. It brought attention to brought attention to fuel poverty and the increasing price of energy in Northern Ireland. Recently, the Communities Minister recently announced the Emergency Fuel Payment Scheme, which was a welcome initiative offering support for those suffering through this fuel crisis. However, the scheme has had issues, and I would like to propose that these issues are raised to the Department of Communities and the Bryson Charitable Group, which is the group responsible for administrating this scheme. First, I suppose the big issue that I'm getting a lot from constituents is that only a limited number of people can apply to this a day. I believe I've seen a figure of 500 people once, but I can't confirm where that was from. But this is basically meaning lots of people are sitting at their computers early in the morning trying to apply for a scheme and having to come back the next day, and this has been going on for a number of weeks now. Secondly, there was a phone number provided, which I was under the impression would be used to request hard copies to apply for the scheme. I've rang this line, but I've only ever got a voicemail message requesting that somebody is to apply online. But as I'm sure you councillors know, many in our district don't have internet access, and many others prefer to work via hard copies. So I would also propose that these hard copies, we could request that hard copies are sent to the elected reps in the various DAs across the country, so that people, so that we can assist our constituents. And then lastly, I would like to add to this letter that an elected hotline is requested. Many of us, I'm sure, remember that during the market voucher scheme, and that was an issue this council was pushing forward. And this scheme will be running to March, and I predict that at least some of us will run into issues if we're helping constituents apply, and it'd be better to request that now rather than wait till we're inordinated with it. So yeah, that's my proposal, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank my colleague for raising that and to come in and second the proposal. You know, it's a scheme that's raised a lot of expectations, and it's very frustrating and stressful for people trying to stay by their phone, stay on a call, get a response with the cap and the numbers applying per day. I understand these schemes are put in place and sometimes there are caveats, but I just would like to see those questions raised. Thank you, Chair.
Are you seconding, Councillor?
Yes,
Bell's,
yes, Chair. I'm
both
seconding that.
proposals?
Yeah, both proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's no more speakers on this. You've heard it proposed and seconded, the letter be noted, and those additional proposals from Councillor Bell. Is everybody happy? Okay, thank you. We will move on to 9.1.2, and that is over to John again.
Yeah, Chair, yes, if I could take 9.1.2 and 9.1.3 together, because they both refer to the cost of free school meals, where the Department of Finance in 9.1.2 has indicated that it's a policy matter for the Department of Education, and in 9.1.3 the Department of Education has responded in relation to both issues in relation to the 8-week timescale period for processing, where they advise that the free school meals team work on an interval or to an internal 4-week SLA turnaround period, and not 8 weeks. And in relation to that, they say that parents should be applying before the end of July in order to be to have it in place, free school meals for the start of the school year. And in relation to that, they outline a number of communications which they take place with parents and indeed with schools and so on. The second part is in effect for the backdating payment, and advise again that the legislation doesn't permit the Education Authority to provide any backdated monetary assistance to parents. It's for no.
Okay, first up on this is Councillor Mcinleader.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and happy enough to note the two letters together. I think that makes sense. Just in response, I would like to raise a further proposal. It's the two very disappointing letters. Again, the Finance Minister happy to pass the buck on to his colleague in the Education Department, and the EA then seemingly happy to blame not only the parents involved but the schools involved, when the individuals that I've been speaking to had submitted their applications well within the time. In fact, quite near the opening date when they were requested, they had submitted all required information, and they were still waiting 6 or 7 or indeed 8 weeks into the term to get payment. And that's where the reference to the 8-week timescale comes from. It's nothing to do what is down in the legislation. Their recommendation, as noted in the letter, is indeed 4 weeks. What we were highlighting in our letter was that it didn't take 4 weeks to do this. It took 6 and 7 and 8 weeks, and indeed into the months of October, and I believe possibly even into the November, to actually progress this. Now, again, we bandy about, or we use the term vulnerable people. These are really, in essence, oppressed people, because when there are some sort of incentives presented to them to assist with the cost and the expense of providing education, of providing clothing, of providing food for their children, these obstacles are constantly put in their way. So I would like to go back, first of all, to the Finance Minister highlighting the second last paragraph there, which states that the EAA doesn't in legislation have provision to backdate money, to request that, given that information, can he or his department provide the backdated monetary payment to parents who are affected by this. And secondly, I'd go back to the EA representative here and question if they have the stats, or if they can find out the stats, how many people applied before the end of July and how many people applied after the end of July within the current school year, and subsequently how many people were presented with the award of the monies in August, in September, in October and in November. Preferably, if they can highlight that for our district, that would be even better. But I would like to see the stats to back this up, because what I'm hearing on the ground certainly isn't reflective of what's involved in this matter. And my final point, it's not a proposal, it's just to note that some of the payments for the uniform grants were actually given to parents after, I suppose, chasing us up, but they weren't actually informed that they had been granted the payments. They weren't informed that the money was put into their bank account. It just suddenly appeared. So obviously there's been a severe breakdown in communication somewhere along the line, as much as the the Director of Operations and Estates heralds their communication strategy. There's obviously a lot of work to be done in improving that, but I would like to make those couple of proposals, Chair, and hopefully we can get support from this council to go back and chase up what is rightfully owed to these people and these families. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and next up we have Councillor Josephine Deacon.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to John for his report. I want to second the noting of this correspondence, and also I'm pleased to second Councillor McAleer's proposals. Like Councillor McAleer, I find this correspondence extremely disappointing, Chair. I just feel that it lacks any empathy with the affected families. Chair, we hear a lot about benefit fraud, but you know, free school meals and uniform grants, these are entitlements, and you know, people, they are designed to ease financial pressures on needy families, and I think it's absolutely disgraceful that these awards have not been paid out to those families who deserve them. In their letter, the EA points to widespread advertisements on social media outlets and on their website, but many parents are not familiar with modern methods of communication, and I know the schools have been particularly helpful, but as Councillor McAleer has said, there were undue delays in getting applications processed, and the fact that applications are not backdated, I think, is also disgraceful. It means that families are unjustly penalised, and as a result of this, often are simply unable to provide adequate daytime food for their families. It's a totally unacceptable situation, and I just didn't find any evidence in that correspondence that the EA was willing to move significantly to accommodate families and schools. So in that light, I think we need to go back to the relevant authorities and ask them to do more to support families in these applications. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, before I go to the next speaker, can I just have a proposal to extend the meeting? Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly, and can I have a seconder? Councillor Irvine. Next speaker is Councillor Swift.
Garamagat Cahirlock, and similarly to Councillor Dehan, and just to concur with her remarks, I too am not imbued with any confidence that enough has been promised within this correspondence from Education Authority. And furthermore, on the particulars of the communications, and indeed Dale Hanna being the Director of Operations, I would further like to highlight more issues that have come to light since our last meeting, where we highlighted the issues within schools as a result of indeed the pandemic and the further oppression, I think was the words used earlier by Emmett. And it is the case where, and I want to propose that this goes on our agenda for our upcoming meeting with the Education Authority. I'm sure Dale will be attending that. And I want to highlight the issue of parents, teachers, and the unions indeed have said that this year's GCSE and A-level candidates have been the worst affected by the pandemic. And they all collectively call for the cancellation of exams due to the months missed of face-to-face learning. And I want to support them in demanding fairness in this instance, and to conduct assessments instead, as they have done in previous years. But the authority needs to make the decisions immediately on the same, and that will obviously have to be the Minister as well for Education to do that. So she needs to be corresponded with also. It has been highlighted to me that the EA or CCA are adamant exams will go ahead no matter what the psychological stress to the pupils have already been. And it's these pupils who have been the cohort of children who are now sitting their GCSE and A-levels this year. They have missed a substantial period of their 4th and 6th year learning due to the lockdown itself, never mind on the return, the rules for the isolated dictated 10 days for close contacts within the classroom. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, all the other associated factors of the open windows and everything else has led to a very poor learning environment. And I do know of many examples of close contacts on 2 occasions and thereby missed 8 days in total of teaching and missed out on much of their learning, which is required for these upcoming exams. So we have to ask the question, how is that fair or even sensible moving forward with examinations given those realities? Again, on the return to school this particular academic year, the same example that I've just provided, they actually contacted COVID and had to isolate again for 10 days. So again, that puts them in a rather back foot step in sitting examinations. And again, we know there's the teachers and everybody, subs and on all of those have unfortunately been face to face with COVID too. And everybody again is doing their very best, but we need a better way forward and it has to be better communicated. Again, it's Dale's communication strategy that I want to really highlight at the meeting upcoming. We can't turn a blind eye to the
Can you bring your
psychological
comments to a
damage.
close, please, Councillor Swift? We need to
Yeah.
move on here.
Yes,
Okay.
we can't turn a blind eye to any of this unnecessary pressure being placed on this particular sector. So have it on the agenda, please. And it's vital for everybody in our super council area working in this sector. Gurmagad.
Councillor O'Coffey.
Yeah, I'd just like to add my voice to this. This is a disgraceful response, really. Yet again, it highlights how Stormont is making laws that are effectively punishing the most vulnerable working class people and children in particular. The idea that somehow, you have to step through all these hoops to prove you're eligible for a benefit to which you have an entitlement. A benefit, let us remember, that is part of the benefit system that was won by the working class people of the United Kingdom as a whole. Through the landslide election of 1940s, after defeat in the fascists, they elected a government which gave us the NHS and a basic benefit system that would look after people from the cradle to the grave. And we're seeing it being dismantled. And now Stormont is telling us that children who and families who are probably suffering, borrowing money from money lenders at interest, are they can't go back, or the legislation will not allow them to pay out. Meanwhile, millions are spent on places like the Royal County Down golf course. This is the reality. This is the priorities we're getting out of Stormont, and the consequences for the most vulnerable are drastic. They've forgotten about the ordinary people, I think, and well, I think hopefully people will have an opportunity to make a change to that. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we really need to move this on here. Adam, I'm going to let you in, but we've had this already proposed and seconded, so please brief.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief. It's just on what Councillor Swift was saying there. The impacts are clear. Entire foundations of learning required for exams have been missed. And it's not just by the current exam cohort, it's by every exam cohort going forward in the upcoming years. Absences are higher than normal. Learning has been missed on a regular basis. And previously, ministers were insistent that exams would go ahead. Did this last year as well. And rather than listen to teachers and school leaders, they insisted and insisted and insisted and waited until the very last minute to make a decision that could have been made months earlier, which would have made life a lot easier for teachers, school leaders, support staff and students, most importantly. And they're doing it again, waiting until the last minute to make changes, because they've made no changes thus far. They say they've made concessions, but they haven't. In terms of what Bernice was saying about that being on the agenda for a future meeting in terms of exams, I think as well as that, if it can be included for long-term going forward, exam concessions over the upcoming years to take into account the impact on the students' foundation learning through this stage. For example, just to illustrate the point, someone who's going into who's currently in year 10 has missed 2 years of massive of education. How can they be expected to go straight into their GCSEs the following year? It's totally unfair. There needs to be proper concessions, none of this piecemeal nonsense that the current that the ministers have done for this year. But if that can be included also, Chair, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Corey, please brief.
Yes, Cormac Caherly. It's just just in response to Coyle Coffee kind of continuously coming in and talking about Stormont. It's just very much ringing now of electioneering, and actually that was confirmed in how he finished his comments there, in that people can vote differently. I think it's clearly outlined in this letter from the EA that there's serious operational issues, and I think the book stops with Dale Hanna as the Director of Operations, and indeed with the Education Minister. I believe that's Michelle McIlveen. I'm not opposed to writing back to the Finance Minister, but as we all are aware, and if you're not aware, then I'm about to tell you, the Finance Minister get the different ministers apply for budgets for the departments, and that goes to the executive, and the executive makes the decisions. I know, you know, maybe people are thinking just because certain ministers may be just doing a fantastic job and others aren't, that they expect those same ministers to jump in everywhere and kind of pick up the slack where other ministers are maybe falling down. I think if we're going back to the Finance Minister, we need to be going back on the basis that the Education Authority is saying that legislation doesn't permit the EA to provide backdated monetary assistance to parents. We want to see the families who are applying for this assistance receiving it, but we want to be clear that what we are being told that's holding it up. And I think with Coyle McAleer's agreement that letter goes to the Minister for Education as well. It's her department, her issue.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McIleader, are you happy enough to include that in your proposal?
Happy to send a copy to the Minister, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and I think it was Councillor Deacon was the seconder. Are you happy enough, Councillor Deacon?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, well, you've heard it proposed and seconded that we note the letter and also the additional recommendations. Is everybody happy? Okay, we'll move on now to item 9.2, and that is to note correspondence dated the 16th of December from the Department of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's just in relation to correspondence again, which we wrote to the Department for Infrastructure in relation to protection of the natural nighttime economy, and stated that the robust policy that ensures lighting is generally not provided in rural communities unless the rural community is identified or where lighting is required, it will contribute to road safety locations. It also details a number of the standards by which street lighting installations are designed, including the use of low energy LED lights. It's for noting, Chair.
Okay, can I have a proposer, please, to note? Councillor Bernice Swift, Councillor Deanna Armstrong. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to 9.3, and that's to note correspondence dated the 24th of December from the Department of Communities regarding the consultation of the local government performance indicators and standards.
Just to note the correspondence, Chair, and that a response would be brought to the February R&C Committee in terms of consultation response.
Okay, proposed by Councillor Irvine, seconded by Councillor Howard Thornton. Next, we have 9.4, and that is to note correspondence dated the 6th of January 22 from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities regarding Her Majesty's Golden or Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it details the opportunities for councils to engage with the Platinum Jubilee, and a number of items are listed. Just to say to members that this correspondence will be brought to the Event Strategy Working Group, where all items in relation to the Jubilee will be considered. For noting again, Chair.
Noting, Councillor Swift.
Yes, Guramagat Cahirlock, and on the point on the national lottery funding, John, where more than 22 million is being made available to help communities come together to, celebrate. Well, on that point alone, I fully object, and I propose that this is not supported by the council, as I do feel strongly that significant amount of money is obscene. An obscene amount of fund for any party. But furthermore, as I've said before and well on record, and my voice is as justified as anyone else's in the council to provide voice to all of those people who would most definitely not support the British monarchy being celebrated in our border area, particularly as pertinent and due to the legacy of partition alone. So I am fully and strongly objecting to that. I appreciate this is going back for further discussion to the events working group, but I am most definitely objecting to this. Guramagat.
Okay, can I have a proposer and seconder to note the correspondence, please, as this item is going back to the relevant committee? Councillor Earl Thompson, seconded by Councillor John McCloughery. Okay. Is there any other correspondence? No. Okay, we'll go now to matters arising from our meeting, and we'll go to page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19, Kim?
Page 19.
Page 19, Chair, we have correspondence at 4.2 on your agenda. We wrote to the Department for Communities in respect of match funding for the Workspace Group, and we have correspondence in response advising that the department is fully aware of the issues. However, no decisions have been made regarding departmental funding for 22-23, and as a result, the department cannot determine any levels of financial support that can be offered to any project.
Okay. Can I have a proposer and seconder to note that correspondence, please? Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly, Councillor Bernice Swift, thank you. Page 20. We've already on page 21 and page 22. Okay, thank you for that. We're very near our time, and I only had one request for AOB, and I think we'll be able to squeeze that in, and I'm going to pass over now to Councillor John Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. Back in November, my local club, Erin Gales, won the Intermediate Championship in Fermanagh. I would like to request that the chairman's reception is held for them. I have the paperwork submitted to Democratic Services, and if the chairman is agreeable, whenever it is convenient. It was a great match between our local rivals, St Mary's Devonish, and good camaraderie between the two towns or the two villages next to each other. It was fantastic that it was passionate and everything else. So I would like if we could have that whenever suits. Thank you.
Okay, no problem there. Next up is Councillor Anthony Feely.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And coming from a Devonish man and living in Galveston, I'll second John's proposal. I know it was a funny enough kind of a game. It had 10 minutes, and well, we were beat anyway, but just second it, and my family members living in the league. So, and just when I'm talking, it was hard luck to Derek only last Sunday. There just wasn't the idea, but they'll be back. It done well to get that far. Just want to mention that too. Thank you.
Okay, you want in, Adam? Okay, so that's been proposed and seconded. It's now up to the chair, and I'm sure he will look at that in due course. Okay, we have just done tonight's meeting by the skin of our teeth. Thank you everybody for your cooperation, and we will move on and tomorrow night to Oma to our P&R. So again, thank you everybody and safe home.